The Port of Vancouver moved $2 billion in cargo through its terminals every month, and Adrian Lennox controlled more of that number than any federal ledger would ever admit. He had stood in rooms that smelled of gunpowder and left them smelling of nothing at all. He had ended careers with a phone call and liquidated partnerships with a single typed sentence, and he had done all of it without once checking the time. On a Tuesday in February, at 17 minutes past 2 in the morning, he stopped dead in the corridor outside his own archive room because of a yellow highlighter and a cup of cold tea. The highlighter was on the floor, the tea was on the shelf beside it, and between them, curled into the narrow gap between row C and the wall, was Seren Wair. She was asleep. Not the careful, composed unconsciousness of someone who had planned a rest. Her head was wedged against a bound binder of port manifests, her left cheek creased from the plastic spine, one arm stretched out across the concrete floor as though she had simply given up mid-reach and let gravity decide. The fluorescent panel above her was still on, casting its flat white light over the folders fanned around her. Cargo logs, Shell company filings, routing codes from the Kravchenko accounts that Lennox's people had lifted from a seized server 3 weeks ago. She had been working through them. Every page she had touched was flagged with a yellow tab. There were 47 tabs. Lennox stood in the doorway for a moment that felt longer than it was. In the daylight, Seren Wair was the most deliberately unremarkable person in his building. She wore the same 2 cardigans in rotation. She addressed him as Mr. Lennox, and addressed everyone else barely at all. She had joined his accounting division 16 months ago via a referral from a retired Vancouver port official who owed Lennox a favor, a quiet way of saying she had been vouched for, vetted, and then mostly forgotten about. She processed the numbers that kept his cargo operations looking like cargo operations. She did not ask what was in the containers. She did not ask where the routing discrepancies came from. She did not ask anything. Until apparently tonight, when she had decided to ask everything, alone, in the archive room, and had fallen asleep doing it. Lennox stepped inside. He crouched down beside the nearest stack of folders she had been working through. He looked at the manifest on top. The page was covered in pencil annotations in a hand, so small and precise it looked machine-printed. She had recalculated 3 columns of transit costs and circled the delta. $340,000 over 6 shipments, moving in the wrong direction. He felt something shift in his chest, not alarm. Something worse, something that required more honesty than alarm did. He picked up the yellow highlighter from the floor. He set it on the shelf beside the cold tea. Then he stood, removed his wool overcoat. Charcoal, the kind of thing that cost more than Seren Wair, probably made in 2 months, and laid it over her carefully. His hands were not accustomed to careful. They were accustomed to efficient. She woke up anyway. Not slowly, not with the bleary, confused assent of someone who had slept well. Her eyes opened like a switch had flipped, and she was upright and half scrambling backward before the coat had even slid from her shoulders. She caught it by reflex, clutching it against her chest, and stared up at him. He watched the sequence move across her face. Recognition, then the kind of terror that comes from being caught doing something you weren't supposed to be doing. Then, and this was the part Lennox found interesting, not a retreat into apology, but a rapid, almost visible recalculation. She looked at the manifests on the floor. She looked at him. She held the coat tighter. Mr. Lennox. Her voice was flat with the effort of keeping it steady. The transit logs from the Aldermore account, the Q3 ones, there's a routing variance that doesn't reconcile with the container weights on record. I needed the physical filings to verify it wasn't a data entry error. She was not apologizing. She was filing a report. I can see that, Lennox said. A pause. The hum of the building's ventilation was very loud. The variance, he continued, is $340,000. Something changed in her eyes. She hadn't expected him to already know the number, yes. Over the Aldermore and Whitfield accounts, with a 3rd entry buried in the Cascadia dry goods routing. He tilted his head slightly. There's a fourth one. You haven't found it yet. It's in the December binders, back half of the shelf. Seren stared at him. Stand up, he said. You've been on a concrete floor for approximately 4 hours, based on when the building logs show the archive door accessed. She stood. The coat fell to her elbows and she shrugged it the rest of the way off, folding it with a precision that struck him as deeply, involuntarily habitual, the way a person folds things when they have grown up in houses where making a mess was not a safe option. She held the coat out to him. He didn't take it. Keep it, you're cold. She looked at the coat. She looked at him. She put it back around her own shoulders with the careful expression of someone accepting something they weren't quite sure was safe to accept. Follow me, he said. His office occupied the north corner of the 38th floor. The city glittered below, the container port, the inlet, the dark ridge of the North Shore Mountains behind the amber glow of West Vancouver. Lennox poured 2 cups of coffee from the press on his credenza. He didn't ask how she took it. He handed her one black and watched to see if she corrected him. She didn't. She drank it like she needed it, which she clearly did. Someone inside is skimming, Lennox said. He stood at the window with his own cup, his back half turned. The pattern is too consistent to be error and too cautious to be amateur. They're using the Cascadia account as a buffer, routing a small percentage of each transit through a mid-chain adjustment, then collecting the net differential in a holding account. I'm not supposed to be watching. Seren sat in the chair across from his desk. She had her hands wrapped around the coffee cup, and she was listening with the particular quality of attention that most people never actually managed. Not waiting for her turn to speak. Actually listening. You already knew, she said. I suspected. The pattern flagged in October. My financial team reviewed it twice and found nothing. A beat. She looked at her coffee. Your financial team reviewed the same accounts being used to hide it. Lennox turned from the window and looked at her directly. Yes. She understood what that meant. The quiet between them was not comfortable, but it was honest. You came down here tonight because you found something your team missed, she said. It wasn't a question. I came down here because I received information that a competitor has been receiving detailed manifest data on my shipments for the past 5 months. I came to find the point of entry. I wasn't expecting to find someone had already started mapping it. Seren set the coffee cup down. Her right hand rested on the arm of the chair, and he noticed for the first time the paper cut along her index finger. Small, already dried, but she'd bled enough that there was a faint rust-colored smear on the highlighter she'd been holding when she fell asleep. She had been at it long enough to bleed and not notice. Who's the competitor? She asked. That's not information you need. If I'm going to finish tracing the account chain, I need to know what I'm looking for at the end of it. Lennox studied her. In the 16 months she had worked in his building, they had exchanged fewer than 30 sentences. She had been a number in a payroll system. A file on his operations manager's desk, labeled reliable, discreet, adequate. He was revising that assessment in real time. The Kravchenko network, he said. They've been trying to establish a Vancouver foothold for 2 years. They're not buying their way in. They're undermining the existing structure, mapping my routes, my clients, my capacity gaps. Seren was quiet for a moment. Then whoever's feeding them information isn't just stealing money. They're selling the architecture. Yes. She looked at the window, at the container port lights clustered along the inlet. I can find them. It was not a boast. It sounded like a sentence she had weighed before she said it. You're a financial analyst. I'm a financial analyst who grew up in the Edmonton foster system, Seren said, and her voice was entirely level, and put herself through 2 accounting designations, working nights at a cannery in Prince Rupert. I have been the person other people forget is in the room for my entire life. I know exactly how accounts look when someone believes no one is watching carefully enough. She paused. Are you going to let me finish the work or not? Lennox looked at her for a long moment. He felt something he hadn't felt in a considerable time, something that sat uncomfortably between respect and a more complicated awareness. He set his coffee cup down. "Tell me about the foster system," he said. She blinked. It wasn't what she'd expected. "That's not relevant." "Humor me." A pause. She looked at her hands. "I aged out at 18. My foster brother Dex was younger. He stayed in care until he turned 19 last year. He has a seizure disorder. The medication he needs isn't covered by provincial benefits above a certain income threshold, and the threshold is..." A pause, something small and bitter moving across her face, "not calibrated for reality. I make enough here to cover it. I make twice what I'd make doing forensic accounting for a firm downtown." She looked up. "That's why I'm here. That's why I don't ask what's in the containers." Lennox did not say anything for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and sent a single message to a number he didn't have to search for. Seren watched him. What was that? "Insurance," he said. He put the phone away. "Go back to the archive. I'll have the December binders pulled. I want the full account chain mapped by morning." She worked until 5:45. He worked beside her. Not in the deferential, careful way of two people who don't know each other. In the way of two people who have discovered, without planning to, that they think in compatible languages. She would identify a figure, and he would cross-reference the corresponding shipment without being asked. He would outline a routing structure, and she would find the shell layer beneath it in under 4 minutes. The archive room was cold, and the fluorescent light was brutal, and somewhere around 3:30 she said, "There's a fourth account, you were right. It's the Tidefall Holdings entry. I need the Tidefall origination docs." And he went and got them himself from the filing cabinet at the end of row A without a word. By 5:30, she had a diagram on a yellow legal pad that looked like a circulatory system with one artery slowly bleeding out. "The money exits here." She pointed to a figure near the bottom of the page. "Not in one transfer. It fragments into 12 microtransactions under 10,000 each, so it doesn't trigger the automated flags. It aggregates in a personal account registered to a numbered company. The numbered company's registered director," she underlined a name, "Darren Belkin. He's your logistics compliance coordinator." Lennox looked at the name. Belkin had worked for him for 4 years. He had attended the company's Christmas dinner in December. He had shaken Lennox's hand. "You're certain?" "I can walk you through every calculation. It'll take about an hour." She met his eyes. "Yes, I'm certain." Something moved through Lennox then, not surprise, because he had long since metabolized the particular flavor of betrayal that came from men who smiled at you and sold you incrementally, but a cold, comprehensive clarity. The kind that preceded decision. He reached across the legal pad and picked up her pen. He circled the name. His encrypted phone buzzed. He read the message. He read it again. The cold clarity turned into something else entirely. He stood up. "Where exactly in Surrey is Dex's housing complex?" Seren's face changed. "Why?" "My surveillance picked up 2 men in the parking area who don't belong there. They've been stationary for 40 minutes. He was already pulling on his jacket. "Kravchenko's people found out you've been in the archive. They know what you've been looking at." She was on her feet before he finished the sentence. How would they? Belkin had access to the building's movement logs. Lennox was moving toward the door. "My team is already en route. Dex is not in immediate danger. But I need to..." "I'm coming." Her voice was flat and absolute. "You're not a field operative, Seren. He's 19 years old and he seizes if he misses his evening medication, and nobody at that complex knows what to do when it happens except me." She stepped in front of him. She was not a large person. She had his coat still over one arm and the legal pad in the other, and she looked at him with the expression of someone who has calculated the odds and decided they don't care. "I know the layout of the complex. I know which staff work the overnight. I know where the exits are, and I know where Dex sleeps. Do you want to stand here and tell me that's not useful, or do you want to get moving?" Lennox looked at her. He thought about saying no. He thought about what it would take to make that stick. "Stay behind me," he said. "When I tell you to stop, you stop. Not when you feel like it, when I say it. The drive to Surrey took 22 minutes. Lennox drove. The city was the particular grey-blue of a Vancouver winter pre-dawn. Wet streets reflecting brake lights. Seren sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap and her jaw set and didn't speak unless he asked her something. He asked her about the layout. She told him 2 entrances, front and through the ground-floor common room, fire exit at the north end of the main corridor, Dex's room on the 2nd floor, east side, 3rd door from the stairwell. She said it all in the same tone she used for financial figures. He understood that this was not composure. It was the opposite. It was what control looked like when the alternative was falling apart in the passenger seat of a car driven by a man who solved problems with violence and money. He didn't mention that. Instead, he said, "Dex knows you work in financial services. Dex knows I do something with numbers for a company downtown and that it pays well enough that he doesn't have to worry." A pause. That's all he needs to know. "How long have you been carrying his costs?" "Since he aged out." She looked at the window. 2 years, 3 months. Lennox did the arithmetic. He knew her salary. He knew her take-home after deductions. He knew what high-grade anti-epileptic medication cost in British Columbia without comprehensive coverage. The margin between what she earned and what she needed for Dex left very little for anything else. She had been running on almost nothing for 2 years and 3 months, doing the work of a person 3 levels above her title, staying late enough to fall asleep on a concrete floor, and she had still found the leak his entire financial team had missed twice. One of Lennox's people, a woman named Hendricks, met them at the building's side entrance. She spoke in a low voice, 2 individuals, one at each entrance, no confirmed weapons but probable. Building overnight staff unaware. Dex Wair, room 214, confirmed sleeping, no contact made. "They're not here to hurt him," Lennox said, reading the shape of it. "They're here to have him, in case tonight went sideways." "The common room door," Seren said to Hendricks. "The latch has been broken since October. It doesn't catch. You don't have to force it." She turned to Lennox. "Give me a radio." He looked at her. "I'm going up the stairwell. I'm getting Dex out of that room before your people make noise at the entrances and he wakes up confused and frightened." Her voice was steady. "He needs to hear my voice first. That's not negotiable." A beat. Lennox took the earpiece from his left ear and held it out to her. "Channel 3. You hear anything through that you don't understand. You get low and you don't move until I say so." She put it in. She was already moving toward the stairwell door. He watched her go. It was over in 11 minutes. Kravchenko's men at the entrances were professional enough to know when a situation had turned against them. They withdrew. In the world Lennox operated in, that was almost a courtesy. He found Seren in room 214, sitting on the edge of the bed with Dex's hand held in both of hers. He was awake, blinking in the overhead light, clearly frightened and working hard not to show it. He looked like her around the eyes, the same watchful quality, the same refusal to give ground. "You're okay," Seren was saying, very quietly. "I've got you. We're going to stay somewhere else for a few days. I'll explain everything later. You have your morning dose." "On the nightstand," Dex said. His voice was rough with sleep. He looked past her at Lennox in the doorway, at the stillness of a man trying deliberately to take up no more space than necessary in a 9x12 room. "That your boss?" "That's my boss," Seren confirmed. Dex looked at Lennox for a moment. Then he looked back at his sister. "You've been awake all night. Your left eye goes like that." "I know," she said. "Get your medication and your bag, just the essentials." They settled Zix in a safe house in Kitsilano, an apartment above a dry cleaner's on 4th Avenue, registered to a numbered company, with 2 of Lennox's people in the unit across the hall. He was asleep again within the hour. Seren sat on the edge of the bed and watched him until his breathing steadied, and then she came out to the kitchen, where Lennox was standing at the window with his 2nd coffee of the morning. The sky over the inlet was turning. Not daylight yet, that early tentative loosening of the dark. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. She said, "Belkin." "My people have him." He'll tell them everything. Yes, he will. She sat down at the kitchen table. She was still wearing his coat. She hadn't taken it off since the archive room. She probably hadn't noticed. He didn't say anything about it. What happens now? She said. Belkin leads us to the contact point inside the Kravchenko network. My people sever it. The network is informed, through channels they understand, that their attempt to establish a foothold in Vancouver has been detected, catalogued, and neutralized. They will not try again soon. A pause. They understand the language of cost. Seren looked at the table, and me. You. He turned from the window. He looked at her, the coat around her shoulders, the legal pad she was still somehow holding, the exhaustion in her face that was not defeat, but had never once been. You mapped a 5-month financial infiltration in a single night, alone, without being asked, and identified the point of origin accurately enough that my team needed only an hour to confirm it. A pause. You found what my financial division missed twice. She didn't say anything. You've been processing low-level accounts for 16 months, he said. Why? Her mouth curved, not quite a smile, because that's what I was hired to do. You were hired to do a job that is approximately a quarter of what you're capable of. She looked at him steadily. People who operate above their apparent level attract attention. I can't afford attention. Dex. Dex, she agreed. Lennox sat down across from her. He reached across the table and turned the legal pad around so he could see the account diagram again. The circled name at the bottom, the clean, methodical logic of her annotations. I'm restructuring the financial division, he said. I need a director of financial intelligence. Someone who understands how the money moves and what it costs when it moves wrong. Someone my existing team can't mislead because they won't know what they're looking at. He looked at her. The salary is 3 times your current one. The role exists on no public record. The account structure for Dex's medication and housing is managed separately and directly. That cost disappears. Seren was quiet for a long moment. That's a significant offer, she said carefully. It's an accurate one. You're offering it because I'm useful to you. Yes. He didn't soften it. I'm also offering it because you spent 2 years carrying a weight that would have bent most people flat, and you still found in one night what my people have been missing for 5 months. That kind of person should not be sitting in a basement archive. He paused. And because you stepped between your brother and people who work for an organization that has caused me considerable problems, and you did it without a weapon, and without asking my permission first. I don't pay that kind of loyalty. I recognize it. Something moved across her face, not the carefully managed blankness she kept in his building, something actual. I have conditions, she said. Name them. Real access. Not curated information, the actual structure. What's behind what? I can't do the work if I'm only seeing the version you want me to see. She met his eyes. Full visibility or I'm useless to you. Agreed. Dex stays out of it. Not as leverage, not as insurance. He's not a variable. Agreed. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, a BC transit bus went past on 4th Avenue, its headlights sweeping across the kitchen ceiling in a long, slow arc. The city was waking up. The coat, she said. He raised an eyebrow. I've been wearing it for 4 hours. A very small, very dry pause. I should return it. He looked at her, the coat around her shoulders, the legal pad in her hands, the particular quality of tiredness in her face that was not defeat and never had been. Keep it, he said. It looks better on you than it does on me. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked out at the city, the pale winter light coming in off the inlet, the mountains beginning to emerge from the dark. She pulled the coat a little closer. When do I start? She said. The answer was she already had. Lennox pushed the yellow legal pad across the table toward her. He set a pen on top of it. You tell me what you need, he said. Seren Wair uncapped the pen. She pulled the legal pad toward her. The city outside was fully light now, that clean, uncompromising blue of a February morning in Vancouver, and the harbor below was alive with the movement of containers and cranes and everything that ran under the surface of a city that didn't ask where the money came from. She began to write.